Do 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 funky fantasy. Do 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 the bowl. Do 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 special guest edition. Do 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 do. It's the War of Nerds. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the War of Nerds podcast. We are short a host tonight, so it's just me and Alfred, but we have a special guest. I'm Nathan Helm, the Funky Fantasy Man.
Alfred Muller.
And we have Shawn Amick on with us tonight. Go ahead and introduce yourself, brother, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your book stuff.
For sure. Yeah, I think most people tend to know me as the host of Between the Pages, which is another podcast focused on kind of empowering the voice of independent and traditionally published authors alike. And outside of that, I'm obviously an author myself. I write high epic fantasy, and my first book, The Cruelty of Magic, was initially self-published in December. And 3 months later, it was picked up by a traditional publisher to be re-released this year. So that's the summary.
Awesome.
And do you have your physical book with you to hold up so people can see the cover?
I have one of those author copies that say "do not, resell" or whatever.
Yeah, that's good enough. Love it.
Yes, absolutely.
I like the grays and the blacks, kind of that like mysterious silhouette almost feel to it. I like that.
Yeah, the artist was one of the members of the Between the Pages Discord. His name's Oleander Bloom, and he was, super helpful with it and just kind of was asking me what I wanted, and I gave him like, I want shadow, I want flames, I want some stuff going on, but I'm a crap artist, and like he just kind of put that whole thing together, and I'm like, well, this is amazing. And then I recently got my cover art back from the publisher that picked up the book. Vastly different from what you see here. It's more Tolkien.
Okay.
Are you happy with it with the new cover art?
Significantly. So, like, if you guys or anyone in the audience is a big Tolkien fan, the Great Tales, those three books, so Beren and Luthien, The Fall of Numenor, Children of Húrin. When they asked me, they were like, send us 3 books that really represent the artistic style that you would love to be represented on the book. I sent them the 3 covers of the Great Tales in the box set. And I was like, all of these fit the vibe, but The Fall of Numenor encompasses it the most because The Cruelty of Magic is, largely inspired by so many different fantasy stories. But I kind of wanted my own fall of a great city sort of thing, but for a vastly different reason. And I always had The Fall of Numenor in the back of my head whenever I was writing it. And the new book cover is totally like The Fall of Numenor.
Cool.
That's awesome. Well, do you want to go first, Alfred, or do you want me to lead it off?
So you kind of answered one of my questions that I was going to ask, but we'll go the personal route first. You say that you're a crap artist, but you seem to appreciate art. What is the story behind your tattoos, and what was your first tattoo?
Very much so. I appreciate art. So my first tattoo is actually text on this Pokemon sleeve. So this whole arm's a Pokemon sleeve. This whole arm is a Lord of the Rings sleeve. There are Easter eggs hidden within both of them. But the text is not Pokemon at all. The text says, "I am nobody," and it is a Doru, which was the spear used by Greek hoplites at the time of like the Iliad, the Aeneid, and stuff like that. So it's very much from the Odyssey, and it's from the moment when Odysseus is taken into the cavern by Polyphemus, the Cyclops son of Poseidon, and Poseidon wants to know everybody's name before he eats them. And Odysseus answers, "I am nobody." And then whenever they launch their scheme, which winds up having them stab Polyphemus in his one eye with a Doru, blinding him whenever Polyphemus starts screaming for help across his island of other Cyclops. He starts screaming, "Help, help, help." But when finally people hear him, he starts screaming, "Nobody is hurting me, nobody is hurting me, nobody is hurting me." So nobody comes to help him because they're like, he's crazy, just ignore it. Odysseus for me always represented cunning over brute strength. So my first tattoo was Odysseus.
Love it.
That's awesome. And I'm sure you've gotten this question before, but with the way that you keep your hair cut, I always like to ask people, were you ever in any of the branches of the military?
No, but I get asked every day at the gym, I swear. The amount of people that ask me what branch I served in, or that just walk up and shake my hand and say, thank you for your service. No, I look like a tight end. All the tattoos, the haircut, and everything. I look like I served. No, I read a lot of books. I played a lot of video games.
Trust me, I know, man. I was in the Marine Corps. I mean, I've got the tattoos and the hair and everything, and freaking that's your general, like, what you expect with
Yep.
that. But my first question for you, as I kind of already forewarned you about, but I want to know why you chose to go the traditional publishing route, and if the place that you went with that picked you up told you that they were going to market for you, or if you still have to do that yourself.
So I'll go with the first bit of the question and go to the last bit, though my ADHD will likely cause my memory not to cooperate. So if I forget to answer a part of the question, just ping me back to it.
No problem.
Why did I decide to go traditional? Well, to be honest, it wasn't even a thought. Don't get me wrong. When I started, I queried like a madman. Thinking back on it now, my queries sucked. And when I queried, it was before I had went in and made some pretty substantial edits to the book. So, like, to be honest with you, I think even when I queried, my book sucked. But as I went through, and I edited it right before the release, but it was a rushed edit. So the cruelty represents my writing from like 4 years ago, and I went in to try and get a lot of these edits done, but I had to do it within like a 2 month time period, and this was honestly entirely my fault. I'd highly recommend no one do the shit that I did, even though I got lucky and it worked out. I was building an audience on TikTok. Between the pages stuff was doing well. People were going to me for help for being an author. And while I was already a published author, I felt like, because my last release was in 2020, felt like I needed to get something out to kind of validate the space that I was starting to fill. So I rushed myself to make sure that I edited the book and that I got it out. So in the rush, there was no developmental changes that could be made. I couldn't change the voice. I had to stick with really who I was 4 years ago. And I just had to make sure that grammatically it made sense and that the story made sense, and to just kind of run with it. So rush, get that out. And then, BTP keeps doing well. And suddenly industry professionals are reaching out to me to come onto the show. And that felt different. At first, it was a literary agent. It was just someone that was a fan of the show, tagged a couple of literary agents they knew. 3 of them got back to me. 1 of them immediately scheduled an interview. Another one scheduled out, I think in the summer. And the one that I interviewed was heavily interested in repping the book, even though they were closed to queries. So they asked me for a query, even though like they ran their agency. They did not take on new representation at all. And he was closed to queries, and he still wanted me to send him a query. So I do. He tells me it's going to be a long time. He's like 6 months to a year, like maybe longer, because he's closed to queries, right? This guy like runs his whole agency. So I don't expect anything, but the interest alone was like, okay, 4 years ago, I wasn't enough of whatever was needed to be. But it seems like now something's changing. So then 3 publishers wind up reaching out to me. They're all small indie trad publishers. So indie trad publisher means they do the exact same thing that Penguin Random House, that HarperCollins, that all those guys do. They just don't have as much money for a marketing budget, right? It's the same thing. They're going to get you into a bookstore. They're going to get your book out there. That you're going to have a contract. You're going to have royalties. It's going to function the exact same. You just less of a marketing budget and less of a marketing presence. So 3 of these publishers reach out to me. When I do the interview, a couple of them wind up reaching out because a couple of publishers jumped in to watch my publisher interviews, and they reached out and was like, "Hey, we want you to query." So then I just looked and I was like, well, let me look at a couple of other publishers while I'm at it. And I went ahead and sent out a bunch of queries to a couple of small indie trad publishers just to see what they said. And in the end, I had like 5 of them that wanted to acquire the book. And the one that I went with met every, I don't want to say demand, but I was fairly aggressive in my like contract negotiations because I didn't have an agent. I was doing it myself. And thankfully, being in the professional capacity that I am, which is, being the director of a wireless franchise, I'm used to a lot of these types of conversations. So it was pretty easy for me to be able to kind of get where I wanted to go. And whenever this one was just, they were super responsive, they were super excited about the story. And not only that, I was going to be the first representation of epic fantasy for this publisher, right? So this was going to be them saying, this is what we do as a publisher, and it was going to be kind of like a showcase sort of thing for them. So whenever they were willing to meet basically everything that I wanted them to do, and they were going to go in and they were going to help with the marketing. Now, once again, I'm not getting a 4th wing budget on marketing, but I wasn't going to have to pay for the editing, and their editors are phenomenal, right? I wasn't going to have to pay for like trying to get any of these reviews out there. They're putting out so much work for me to go on like different podcasts and stuff like that. Like they send me a message probably once every week being like, yo, we secured this show for you, right? Another thing, like 2 other things that they've done. One of them happened before I agreed to sign on. The one that they agreed to do before they signed on is they found out that I'd written a short story, which is titled The Cruelty of Love, which serves as a prequel to The Cruelty of Magic. And they were like, well, what we would really like to do is we'd really like for you to submit this short story for awards, which means that you won't publish it through us. So they wanted me to push towards award submissions that they would get no credit for, that they would get no money for. And they were like, send it over to us so we can edit it for free. So they wanted to edit a short story that they weren't going to publish so I could try and go win some awards because they knew that it would help the book release. So with all that stuff, I was like, I don't need a 4th wing budget. I need to do the thing that I'm good at. I'm good at writing. I'm not good at marketing, but I'm decent at creating a platform, right? And having a platform alone tends to be semi-decent marketing, right?
Yeah.
So I can continue doing what I'm doing as far as a platform, and that's going to garner me an audience regardless. So I'm going to continue doing my marketing. So to answer the second part of your question, like, are they going to do the marketing for me? Yes, but I'm going to continue doing it because that's just built into what I am. I'm going to continue being active in the space that I've created. I'm going to continue doing the interviews in the way that I do them. I'm going to continue running the Between the Pages Discord and trying to empower indie and traditionally published authors' voices, because largely that has a reason to do with why people became interested with me in the first place. And because that interest happened, I've now been given the chance to go back into Cruelty, to update the voice, to add the things that I want in there, to change a lot about the story, to add more representation from a bit more of a diverse perspective. And I get to release it the way that I would have preferred to do it had I not rushed it to begin with. So in short, why did I go from indie to traditional? It's because it's allowing me to focus on what I'm good at, which is writing and making a platform. What I'm not good at is organizing all this contract work. What I'm not fine with is the amount of money that I find myself shoveling out, because I don't take the cheap way out, right? Like I'm probably $8,000 into Cruelty, right? I put a lot of money into that thing, and knowing that I don't have to come out, 8-10 grand every time I decide to write a book, that's a boon. Knowing that they're going to come out and they're going to help push marketing with ads, that's a boon. Knowing that they're going to help with marketing by trying to submit and get me into shows, that's a boon. More recently, they asked me to sign up to be a speaker for a rather large conference out in Pasadena. It's a form that you fill out, and if they're interested, they reach back out to you. Well, they reached back out to me, and they were like, hey, we're interested in having you speak at our conference. Give us a list of things that you'd be willing to talk about. So I did, and sent it to the publisher, and I was like, hey, it seems like they're interested. They're going to want me to do it. I don't know if they're going to want me to do it virtually or in person. And they were like, well, send us the link that they sent you, which was a registration link. And they just send me a screenshot back, and I get an email notification, and they paid for my registration to go out to this place, virtual and in person. And they're like, have a blast, go out to speak, right? Like, so it, there's a lot of reasons why, but I can sum it up into they support me in a way that I don't like to manage myself. And it allows me to fixate on the things that I do good with.
I just wanted to say this. When you talk to a lot of younger authors and new authors, they always say they want to go traditional route because they market for them. And they don't understand exactly what that marketing looks like. And your answer kind of informs them of what that would look like. Like they probably don't think about them reaching out for cons and different podcasts, and having the cloud of a publisher behind you helps, instead of you just approaching a podcast or somebody saying, can I please come to your thing? And then them willing to front the money for that is another bonus to traditional publish that, like you said, indie publish, you got to front that money to begin with.
Yeah, it's definitely been a huge bonus for me. And like, really every time they've stepped up, like Jamie's just kind of looked at me with a drop jaw, and she's just like really, they did that? And like at this point, she's like, when I go to release my book, I'm going to your publisher, like hands down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I gotta say, from the stories that I've heard, the horror stories with trad publishing, like these places, they don't do any marketing whatsoever. You still have to do it all yourself, and there's people whispering in your ear telling you what you have to change about your stylistic choices and your flavor and this and that and deadlines. And I'm just like, yeah, that doesn't sound like my cup of tea, but the little deal that you got going sounds a lot better and um a lot more freedom, and like they respect your choices of how you want to write your book, and they're just there to support you.
Yeah. So one thing that I forgot to mention, prior to me signing the contract with them, they received the manuscript. So I sent it to them, and they did a full, what do they call it? Literary market analysis, I believe, which is so like they read it, the editors read it, whoever needs to read it on the marketing team does it. Like they did their whole thing, and they came back with essentially a test, and it was ranked, and basically like your story was scored out of 50 points, and your voice was scored out of this, and your characters were scored out of this, and your setting and the way that you approach the genre was scored out of this, right? And they gave me this scoring metric, and like one of the things that just like kind of blew me away was that with this being my writing from, like I said, like 4 years ago at this point, on the voice, they gave me a 67 out of 70. And it was the shortest answer that they provided in the entire analysis. And it said, this author has figured out not only how to write, but how they should write, probably for the rest of their career. I have nothing to offer this person in improving their voice. No suggestions will be made.
Wow.
And I was just, and immediately I was just like to me, knowing like with me and like the people that kind of read the stuff that I'm currently writing now, like most of those people that have seen what I'm doing now know that my writing is like far better than what is currently in Cruelty. And seeing that about my writing from 4 years ago, I was just like, man, this feels good. Okay, so I can do this. Like I'm capable. I don't have to feel like an imposter. Do I? Absolutely. But there was professional validation behind it because they were honest about some other stuff, right? They were like, I'd really like to see this improvement for characters, right? I'd really like to see this improvement with like story development. Like the biggest complaint that they had was the biggest complaint that everybody has. The book's not long enough. It's a good problem to have when people are saying, why isn't there more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Along those lines, did you plan Cruelty of Magic to be a series, or was it going to be a standalone? And then to tie into that, did they offer you a contract for a single book or for a series?
Funnily enough, I actually posted a video about that one just like an hour or two ago. So the so initially I was planning on writing it as a series. It was initially planned to be 4 books. I think it might be 3 now. Initially, it was going to be the cruelty of magic, the cruelty of gods, the cruelty of devils, the cruelty of man. And I think that gods and devils is very likely going to be combined. And it'll be a bit more tome-like for the second book. And the third one will be kind of be like this broader finale. Now, there will be other books that exist within this universe, though they will function entirely on their own. And it'll be one of those things where it's like people are having to hunt for different things in different timelines, and not like time travel. Like time travel is not really going to play a role in cruelty as far as I currently have planned. But just that you'll be watching events in different times, but they will entirely stand on their own. And I've considered even possibly just making the universe altogether different. The next thing that I plan to write outside of cruelty is focusing on this character, and I've already got the title of the book. It's the Half King Halfling, and I'm so very excited to write that book. And I'm already like 30,000 words into it, and I had to reel myself back and be like, cruelty, damn it, like focus. But I more than likely 3, possible 4 books. There's a whole ton of spin-offs that sit in my head. I don't know if I'm going to run in the direction of those as soon as cruelty is done. I think the Half King Halfling is going to be the next thing that I do. And I have yet to completely determine whether or not it's going to be in the same universe as cruelty, or if it's going to kind of open up something else.
Cool. That's awesome.
Oh,
Now,
I'm sorry. ADHD kicked in. Let me answer the other question that Alfred asked me. When I signed the contract, did I sign the contract for the whole series? No, they wanted me to. They didn't push it. So basically, I had the choice. Whenever I signed on, they were like, I asked them, I'm like, all right, do you want to acquire the rights for Cruelty, book 1, re-release it, and then if things go well, then you do the rest of the series, or do you want book 2 and moving forward? And their response was, you decide. If you will allow us to acquire book 1, then we will acquire book 1. We will re-release it. We'll put it under all of our guidelines and all that sort of stuff, and then we'll continue with the rest of the series. And I jumped at the opportunity to retell the story of Cruelty because I wanted to update it. I wanted to give people a little bit more. Is it going to go from the 106,000 words it was to 180? Absolutely not. Is it likely going to be closer to like 120? Probably. Is it going to be more detailed? Yes. Is the heavy amount of exposition that's currently in it going to be in there? Absolutely not. There's so much different. In fact, like an entire female perspective has been added to that book on top of Kyra, which already existed, right? So there's so many changes that I'm super excited for, and they gave me the option to choose. Do I want to start over from book 1 and go with the rest of the series? And I said, start over with book 1, and if you do well, then I'll have no reason to not continue with you through the rest of the series. So like they know that they've got to kill it for the rest of the time that we're trying to get book 1 for Cruelty out there, because they've given me the complete ability to just walk away and take the rest of the series somewhere else.
That's something that's very important, I think, and special, because a lot of the times when they assign you for a series and the first book doesn't do well or the second book doesn't do well, then they cut ties and move on. But in this case, you already have the indie background that you could always go back to. Worst case scenario, I don't think that's going to be the case. From what I hear, it sounds like you are in great hands. Sounds like you have an amazing editorial staff that's going to help you, and you have a great idea of where you want to go with it. So I wish you all the best with that, and I think you will do well. But it is nice to know that you have only contracted out book 1, and you still have the rights to your other stuff, so you could do with that as you need to.
Yeah. Another thing that's pretty common with publisher contracts is right of first refusal. So what that means is that if you write something, you have to present it to the publisher and they have to refuse it before you can take it somewhere else. That's another thing that's not in my contract. They don't have right of first refusal.
That's amazing.
It is, and I feel you on the rewriting. I just got done, almost done rewriting my first book, and it's about 60,000 words longer. But like I'm really, really happy with it. So it's fun to rediscover and redo that stuff. But my next question for you is, and it's one of my more favorite questions. That's not proper grammar, whatever. I can't, my brain hole doesn't work tonight. What was the most embarrassing moment in your entire writing career for you?
Most embarrassing moment in my entire writing career. Thirst traps on TikTok. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna go with that. Even though I largely have those video, and for anybody that's listening that's like, I've never seen this TikTok and I'm gonna watch it now. It's they were more like comedic relief thirst traps. I never went full into I actually think that people want to see this. Largely I think that I have that effort to thank for a lot of what gave me my initial boost in my audience on TikTok. So like I don't regret it, but it's hard to say that it's not the most embarrassing thing that I did.
That's awesome.
Oh, man.
We say it on every show. I think it's important to be able to laugh about things that happen to us in our careers, our journeys that were maybe seemed embarrassing at the time, but you just look back and it's kind of like just a funny little joke and a fun memory to look back on. So that's awesome.
It's one that I'll never get away from too, because so on TikTok, if you have subscribers, you can have subscriber only emojis and stickers. And of course, because the beautiful Megan and Pebbles that help me run the show will never let me live that down. One of my thirst traps has been immortalized into a subscriber only sticker that appears in every live show that I do.
Oh man, that's great. Well, you bring
That's
it up.
awesome.
We had Megan on and we talked a little bit with her about Between the Pages, but I remember when I first met you, it was your first calling for authors and of all types, voice actors and everything to come on Between the Pages. How did that start on your end? How did that kind of grow? I know you said you got the thirst traps that kind of built your audience to start, but what gave you that incentive to do interview style podcast?
So it was a mix, largely based off the fact that I've already done it, and I'd already done it successfully, just in a completely different medium. So my TikTok started, my lives started. So I did the same follow for follow, reader party, whatever, that everyone did for those first 1,000 followers, so you could start going live. And then I stopped doing them because they tend to be just empty followers, don't really do you any good. So I started my first 2 or 3 lives. It might have been more, but it couldn't have been many more, of trying to do reading sprints. And as you mentioned, the art that is all over me managed to catch a few eyes, right? As soon as I started doing the reading sprints. And people started engaging with me, which I didn't expect, very quickly. And then I just started kind of having conversation with them about what I did and the book that I was going to release and stuff like that. And then people asked me to do a reading, and so I started doing lives where, and I was single at the time, so I had the ability to do this. I started going live like every night, and was setting live goals to where if we got to like a certain thing, then I would do a live reading, and the live reading would be 500 words to 1,000 words, whatever it was. And people were really latching onto it. Now, I was also using my writing at that moment. I started actually doing my readings for the Half King Halfling, right? So what I was reading wasn't even actually cruelty. And people were really into it, and which was awesome. And people kept kind of coming in, and they started asking questions about writing and stuff like that. And they figured out that I was an author and that I'd released a book a few years ago and stuff. And people were kind enough to put me on a pedestal as though I had already made it, and I very much hadn't. But I feel I know how to. And I'm more than willing to talk about that very slow progression. I'm not the person that's hoping for overnight success. I know how to grow over time. That's what I'm good at, and that's what I'm going to continue doing. So I kept doing that, and I kept having so many authors that were joining my live, asking me questions. And I started realizing, one, how big the indie author space was. And I started realizing, two, how confusing the indie author space is, and how alone so many people are, and how marketing is the most terrifying thing for a lot of these indie authors. So I started thinking, I'm never going to grow a platform if all I do is go live and read my damn books. There's only so much space in people's minds that they have to give somebody else's purely created content that isn't humor, right? You can follow a channel forever if it's based on humor, but if it's something of substance, you've only got so much time. So I knew that I needed to provide something to the broader community in order for people to care about who I was and what I did. And the initial thought was, I need to create the gateway. I need to create the starting point for indie authors. I need there to be no gatekeeping. I need everyone to know that anyone can join, that anyone can be supported, that anyone can talk about their work. And I need to show people how to market and how to get the word out. So that's where I started thinking, okay, what am I going to turn these lives into? Go back for a minute. I was a staff writer for Bitcoin Magazine for a little while. And whenever I was doing that, I was helping run a crypto-based podcast, which was called Citizens of Blockchain. So I'd been interviewing people in that setting for a moment. I had interviewed people for the first book that I'd wrote years back, so interview settings weren't necessarily new. As a staff writer for Bitcoin Magazine, hell, I spoke with the president of El Salvador. I spoke with a hacker taking down Russian networks. I interviewed so many very, very interesting people, including truckers in the protest in Ottawa. Like, wow. Interviewing is a thing that I've accidentally done for a long, long time. So it was very easy for me to be like, I'm good at, and another side note, in my role as like a director for a wireless franchise, it's my job to show you who you're capable of being rather than letting you continue doing what you think you should, right? And just like really pulling out a lot of the best in people. And I figured, well, if I'm good at interviewing. I'm good at pulling out the best of people. I'm good at giving them direction to talk about the thing that matters to them. I think the easiest thing is to have an open door policy for interviews for anyone to come on and talk about their work and celebrate their work. So that's where the initial Between the Pages started. And I didn't even name it that. All the branding for the Between the Pages stuff, you have Pebbles to thank for that. I put out the thing and said that I was going to start interviewing authors. And I literally sent that to Pebbles. Told her when I was going to do it. Told her that I was going to post a video. I put up the video and randomly I just get a text message and it's this Between the Pages logo. And she's like, yeah, here's your podcast. And I'm like, all right. Like,
I think
that's awesome.
When you had done my interview, you'd only had that up for like a couple of episodes and whatnot, and you were talking about how awesome she was and how she did that for you, and it looks great. It's definitely got your like when you think of Between the Pages, I think of you. I think of Megan. It's definitely the brand, and it's grown so much since that first interview.
Yeah, no, it's made a lot of progress, and it's entirely based on the one thing that will always make you successful in marketing, which is the easiest thing to explain and the hardest thing to achieve, which is grassroots marketing. It's easy to explain because it's simply word of mouth. It's hard to achieve because it takes time. My audience that watches the show, you're always going to see the viewers fluctuate between like 15 to 20 viewers, but that holds across the entire hour and a half. So it's never actually just 15 or 20 people that are watching. It's 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 or even more, sometimes 500-600 people that tune into the show. It's just at any given time, you're typically holding 15 to 20 of them. Once again, why? Because it's substance and it's not humor based. right? So I'm not hopping on there and trying to do some AI performative thing. So you send me a rose, right? We're talking about something that actually matters, a piece of creation, a piece of art. And it's a testament to how involved, a lot of authors and a lot of artists will be to support not only their art, but somebody else's, that Between the Pages continues to be as successful it is, and to hold the audience that it does over, an hour and a half to 2 hour long show every damn night.
You definitely put in the work. That's the truth.
100%. Now, if you had the opportunity to turn your book, your series, into a movie or a TV show, what would you want it to be? Live action or animated? And what would it look like for you?
It'd be live action. It would go on a streaming service. It would come out all at once. And as I've taken place in the negotiations of my contracts with this publisher, I would take place in the negotiations of my contracts with that TV show. One of the most heartbreaking things for authors is how not wanted you are on a Hollywood set. You're often looked at as less than the people that cater the meals to the set, because at least the caterer has a job, right? So it's very hard to have any sort of creative control over a TV show whenever as much money as needs to go into it to make a TV show is present, because typically there's an amount of bullying that can happen from the streaming service provider, from the television service, from whatever it is. I would try my best to make sure that I was in the room whenever the story was being discussed, and I would encourage differences. I would encourage it to be an adaptation and not a film retelling, right? I would want them to make changes, because I recognize that books and movies, or books and TV shows, are entirely different mediums, and they need to accomplish different things at different times. So I would encourage changes. I would just want them to be true to what the story was. So it would be one of the hardest things that I would ever have to do is figure out where the balance was between accepting the story being told through a new lens and accepting that I can't control every part of how it changes. And I would just do everything I could to be in that room.
Yeah, that's the way I think a lot of authors want, is just let my voice be heard when you're working on my stuff. Because I mean, that's what Rowling did with Harry Potter, and those movies were very successful adaptations of the book.
Yeah, I think like one of the best representations of like what happens when you sell your work and you can't have something to say about it. Either you guys played Hogwarts Legacy, because there's in Hogwarts, and I can't tell you what room to go into, but you know how they have like the live paintings and the live pictures on the wall.
Yeah.
Well, there's a picture of J.K. Rowling as a witch burning on a stake. And she got super mad and reached out to them and was like, "You can't do this, blah, 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 blah." And they were like, "But we can, though. You signed a contract, so bye."
Password.
Yeah.
Remove
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, so it's obviously important, right, that you know what you're getting into, and if something like that can happen to J.K. Rowling, and I'm not saying that the game developer was wrong. I love that they did that. To be honest, I think it's hilarious. But it's those contracts mean something, and that would be the most difficult thing for me.
So
yeah,
sorry, Nathan, go.
No, you're good, brother. Continue, please.
I was just gonna say, to move away from books for a second. You got a whole sleeve of Pokemon. What generation did you start playing in, and which is your favorite Pokemon?
I started playing with Generation 1. The entire sleeve, other than Melodic, is Generation 1. And my favorite Pokemon is right up here on my shoulder. I love Haunter so very much.
He's a great Pokemon, absolutely. That was my favorite Ghost Pokemon for several generations.
Yeah, it was the TV show. The TV show just made me fall in love with him.
I remember the
You gotta
opening
catch 'em all.
scene, licks Charmander, and Charmander's
Yep.
freaking out, and he's just a goofy ghost.
Yep. No, it was great, and there was a couple of them that were like that whole like the Haunter thing, and then you get the Cubone story, and it's like the saddest points of like that Generation One show, and they're all these like really heart wrenching stories told through the lens of a child video game and a child show, where you kind of see what sadness looks like when no one wants to play with you, and what sadness looks like whenever you're abandoned, and you do that through the cutest possible lens that one can.
Absolutely.
100%. And what you obviously like Pokemon, but is that your favorite anime, or do you have one that actually is more cherished than that for you?
If we're going from a nostalgic childhood based thing, it's 100% Pokemon. If we're going from simply like good storytelling, the way that I like storytelling being done, it's Death Note, like 100%.
Oh,
But it's the first half. It's the first half, and you guys know the event. I'm not going to say it for anyone that hasn't watched it, but there's the event where like things change over, right? And like right there, I'm like, this isn't for me. But those first like 25, 27 episodes, whatever it is, where it's just like the greatest cat and mouse that I've ever watched. Like I love those intellectual battles of giants. And to kind of kick it back, that's why I'm so excited to write the Half King Halfling. Hint, hint, wink, wink.
awesome.
That's
That's
awesome. When you're not, and I've seen these videos that you posted on TikTok, and that your wife is also an author. Now, is your wife staying as an indie author? Is my first question. And my second question is, how is it like being married to somebody who's also an author?
So I don't I don't even want to make this correction because I kind of just want to let that live on the internet. But for the sake of being completely like correct on everything, I'm not married. Um,
Okay.
I most certainly will be, and I have most certainly commissioned a particular piece of jewelry. Yeah. But working on it, folks. Anyway, but yes, she is an author. Her name's Jamie. I love her to death. Greatest thing that's ever happened in my life, and so is the little tyke that she brought into my life. What is it like being with another author? Neither of us shut the fuck up about our story. But we are probably each other's greatest cheerleaders. Like I would say there's almost a daily, if it's not daily, it's at least like every other day, multiple times a week for sure. Where like one of us is telling the other about where the story is going, and we just like walk off because we're like, how dare you do that to me? How dare you hurt that character in that way? So like there's a whole lot of those conversations. There's a whole lot of like, how do we like improve each other's story? Like for instance, this isn't going to be like a big spoiler, and this is actually for Jamie's book, Playing the Pawn. There's these two kind of warring factions, to just kind of summarize it. And one of them is about like bioengineering, very like X-Men but man-made type feel. And the other one is more X-Men, where it's a bit more natural, and they like you have different powers, but they function like way different than something like X-Men would. It's like Hunger Games and X-Men mixed. And it's really good. It's going to be really good. I'm very excited for the world to kind of get a hold of that story. I think that she's going to do really well. We were working on like sayings, like how like societies will have like a greeting or a goodbye or a well-wishing compliment or something that you'll say. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but the bad side was saying something like, may your blood be made of ivory, because the place that's bad is referred to as like the ivory tower. And it's really cool. It's really cool. But it's basically saying that like ivory blood, like this man-made power that you can receive, is the greatest thing that can be bestowed on you. So it's may your blood be ivory, or may your blood be made of ivory. And then we were talking and going back and forth about what the second one was going to say. And then one of the things that I threw out there was, because the saying for the good people was longer and it was hard hitting, but We were talking about it, and we thought that something shorter would hit better. And we came up with just May Your Blood Be Your Own.
Oh,
Right? May you be in control of your own destiny. May you be in control of your own power. Right? And like that was probably a 20-minute long discussion about like what should the good side say and what should the bad side say. So there's like so much back and forth. In fact, there's my short story, The Cruelty of Love. The ending is entirely because of Jamie, like 100% because of Jamie. It was because like she was telling me not only how she thought necessarily it should end, but how the ending would play into the rest of the series. And like as I was sitting there listening to it, first off, like me and her both have ODD, like oppositional defiance disorder, like a mother, right? So us hearing something from someone else is always just like not my idea, right? But whenever she says something that's like hard hitting, like that one was, I was like, oh, I'm mad that you're right. Like, all right, now I gotta go do this thing. So there's so much of that, right? And then on like the funnier side, we get to do like these couple videos on TikTok and stuff. Like we're currently like as a couple reading Bram Stoker's Dracula. And we made a video about that today, and we're gonna like wind up uploading that. So like we not only do we get to share in the craft, but we get to share in the growth, because like we're very much of the opinion like you're never going to be a good writer if you're not a good reader, right? So we're reading all the time, be it actual books or audio books and anything in between, or just like watching movies, TV shows, like engaging with as many stories as possible. And we get to do that together. There's not a single story really that either one of us loves that the other one's not like, yeah, let's go. Like a new movie comes out where one of us is excited, both of us are excited. Like one of us sees, a commercial for like a really good movie, like we're both hyped. Like we're gonna watch Napoleon tomorrow. We're both fucking thrilled about it, right? So there's so much excitement behind stories, and there's excitement behind kind of growing some of these platforms. That's something that I never have to explain. Like, I got to go do this stuff for TikTok, something like that. Like I've had a previous partner, right, where that was a problem, and it was like, why you don't have to put that much time onto it, but she completely understands like the effort that I have to put into it, and she's fine with us having to schedule around doing the Between the Pages podcast and all that stuff. That's not something that you would get out of a normal partner. So there's excitement, there's understanding, there's sharing, there's growth, and there's all of those things, and it's because we're both authors.
that's awesome.
That's
My
awesome.
my younger and youngest sister, both of them like to write. My youngest has an issue with like finishing and whatnot, but the younger sister is a far better writer than I am. And there'll be days after Sunday dinner where we're all sitting around BSing and just constant conversation of, oh, I want to do this in my story, I want to do this, or critiquing and feeding back. So that's amazing that you have that, and that you are both willing to listen, even though there may be some headbutting in between. But the
Oh
fact
yeah,
that you have each other to feed off of is great.
yeah.
Absolutely.
It's been one of the most beneficial things, for sure, for my writing specifically, not to count all the personal benefits,
Yeah. So you've mentioned the Iliad, the Odyssey, Bram Stoker's Dracula. What is your favorite classic novel, if you have one?
Lord of the Rings,
Lord of the Rings.
no questions. It's a tattoo sleeve.
That's a good
It is
answer.
definitely one of our favorites here on this podcast, without a doubt. From The Hobbit to Lord of the Rings and all the side stories, the Silmarillion, and the three you had mentioned earlier, it's just such a world that Tolkien created, and an amazing story. Uh, the classic good conquers evil, and the strife that we have to go through to get to that end goal. So awesome answer.
Yeah, no, like look, I have had probably 3 different disc sets of Lord of the Rings. Like if one was lost or misplaced for like even a moment, I went and got it, and then as soon as I could buy it on Amazon as a digital product, so I could have it wherever I was on the internet, I instantly got it there. I've had probably multiple copies of Lord of the Rings whenever Andy Serkis, the guy that plays Gollum, for anyone who doesn't know, released. I think it was like the whatever anniversary. It was a couple of years ago. He redid all of the audiobooks. Like I jumped for joy, like it was a new book that came out, And anytime reading is just pissing me off, and like I've been trying to engage with a book that I just can't get into, or maybe it's like R.A. Salvatore, where I love the man, but he wrote 40 books of the same character, and I'm gonna finish them all, but god damn it, I need a break every now and then. Like I always return. I always return to Lord of the Rings.
That's
Who's
awesome.
your favorite character?
And
Who's my favorite character? Books or the novels? Or books or the movies, sorry.
We'll go books.
Books. Gandalf. He's more of a dick.
Nice.
Definitely Gandalf.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. Since we're getting pretty close to wrapping time, I would say my last question is, if you could tell anybody listening what's something you feel is unique about you and your writing that sets you apart, when somebody sees your book and sees your writing, you know, what do you want to be remembered by when somebody's reading your work 20 years down the line?
This is a very, like, I believe, a very egotistical statement to make. If I haven't achieved it now, it is my goal to do so before the end of my writing career. I believe in my current state that I'm a classical voice for a modern age.
Okay.
And I very much believe that one of the unique things, if not the most unique thing, that you'll get out of following me, keeping up with my work, and reading my stories is you will always feel as though you are in the classical, archaic voice of epic fantasy. And I will refuse to use the tropes as you know them.
Awesome. I like that.
That's awesome. I like that.
As authors, I think
Jinx.
as a group, we kind of get like a modest thing. Like you don't ever see our authors come out and be like, "Well, I'm the best there is" and whatnot. We're always very, or in general, most interviews they're modest and whatnot. But I think there's a time where we need to be a little boastful, because one, you got to get your book out there, and two, we're proud of what we write. So I think even if it is a little boastful in that sense, I hope that you do reach that, and I'm looking forward to reading the book. Because I do have it. It's the older copy, but I'll read both. But
I'll tell you what I would appreciate if you do get to reading book one. If you don't, that's totally okay. Thanks for buying it. If you do read book one, or listen to the audiobook, because the audiobook's out now too. If you read or listen to it, I would ask that when you read or listen to book one when it releases, I would love to know your thoughts on how it either improved or got worse.
okay. I will absolutely do that for you.
Easy enough. And for anybody listening, where would you like them to come find you? TikTok, Facebook, your personal website?
There's plenty of places that you can find me, but TikTok's by far the best. It's just at Shawn Amick author, first last name author. You'll see the picture of me. You can't miss the tattoos. It's on everything. So if you go there, there's a link tree in the profile that'll take you to all of the things. I have a newsletter that a whole lot of people follow, and which I'm super thankful for. You can find my Twitter there. You can find my personal website there. You can find all the socials there. You can also find the calendar to schedule your interview for Between the Pages if you're an author or an artist of some kind that's looking to get their work out there that's related to the bookish industry. So TikTok's the easiest way to find me, and then you can go from there to all the rest of the platforms.
Awesome. And then I do have one last question to leave you with. Have you ever co-written anything? And if you have or haven't, is there anybody in your head that you would love to co-write with?
The first novel that I published was co-written. So once again, if you go to TikTok and you click on the link tree, one of the links will take you to my first book. It's titled Dick Stan Green, Dick, Stan, Dreene. It's a play on how they used to call detectives dicks, right? And one of the ongoing jokes of the novel is that the guys, you're almost standard. We tend not to. I never do tropes, as you know. He looks to be your typical washed up, off the force investigator. And when people call him Dick, he thinks that they're referring to his job, when in reality they're actually just calling him a dick because he makes everybody mad all the time. The easiest way for me to summarize this book is Sherlock Holmes if he smoked weed all the time and was really, really bad at his job. He comes complete with his own Watson with PTSD, though within a modern age, and he plays a heavily virtual reality war game to compensate, and he functions far different than Watson ever did. So that was co-written by myself and Terry Rogers. The world was initially created by Terry Rogers probably 12, 13 years ago. He saw my writing when I first started writing Cruelty because we was working the same job at that time, which was for a wireless franchise. And I was a manager. He was an assistant manager. He saw my work because I accidentally left it up on a computer. And he was like, dude, I have this story. I have this world. I so desperately want to get it out to the world, but I know I'm not good enough at writing to do it. Let's work together. So I asked him what he already had, and he had a world. We didn't have anything like put to pen to paper as far as like an actual chapter 1 or a prologue or really nothing. So we kind of dove into it, and it took about 2.5 years. And that process is grueling. Do I have anyone in my mind that I want to write a book with? Absolutely not. That process is just absolutely difficult. And if you don't have a good, strong foundational relationship with the person that you're going to do it with, it is a risk. It is a really large risk. In fact, there was a time where me and my co-authors stopped talking for probably like 6 to 8 months. It was well after the book was released. And it was on like contract negotiations for like moving forward and stuff like that. Now we're back to being very close friends. Book 2 for that is very much in conversation. I tend to be rather busy, as most people that keep up with my content know. So it's hard for me to find the time to actually get involved with writing book 2 of that. I will continue being a co-author with Terry. We will continue telling the story of Stan Green because it is a dark comedic flip on everything that you've ever known in the mystery detective genre. And we've had nothing but glowing reviews of everyone that thinks it's absolutely hilarious, which, makes us nothing but happy. So if you find the right person, it's worth doing, but my God, is finding the right person difficult.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Well, Mr. Shawn, that brings us about to the end of our time, and I wanted to thank you very much for coming on our show and hanging out with us and telling us about yourself.
Yes, thank you.
Hope you had a good time.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on the show, and I know you guys are, just been starting out in recent months, and I hope the show has all the success that you guys are hoping for.
Thank you. Yeah,
Appreciate
it's been a blast, and we wanted to highlight you as best we can because I know you do the between the pages, and you're on our side normally when you're doing that. So to try and highlight you a little bit more, even though I know you do a good majority of that on your own TikTok, but to give you a platform outside of that where you can discuss yourself and talk about what you're doing and all that stuff. So thank you for coming on.
It's nice to be the interviewee,
Imagine.
Absolutely.
Who doesn't love talking about themselves?
For sure.
All the time, right here. Well, all you funky listeners out there, this has been your bearded nerdy hosts coming back with you with another episode, and we'll be back again very soon. Y'all have a fantastic night.